everyone, Miss Puck here from Mirror Lake. Thanks for joining us today. Let's take a look at our learning target. Go ahead and read with me. Ready, go. I will infer a character trait on the children with evidence. So you'll have to wait and see who the children are in our next story. You ready? Don't worry, if you forgot what a character trait was, here's a quick little poster for you. It's describing someone on the inside based on their thoughts, actions, and words. If you've joined us before, I showed you this before as well, but let's review it real quick. Here's just some examples of different character traits that someone could have. Maybe you could think of one for yourself or your family as well. One word is silly. That would be a character trait. And here's an example. They always try to make other people laugh. Or there's kind. Maybe they always say please and thank you. Those are some words they use often. Or thoughtful, like sharing your favorite snack with your little brother. And then there's also brave, like we'll go up to new kids to say hello. And so it's using all those thoughts, actions, and words and having evidence to back it up. Of course, these are not the only character traits there are. There are so many more. So let's take a look at what other words we can use for this book. This is Chicken Sunday by Patricia Polacco. If you joined us the other day, she was also the author of John Philip Duck. Remember that these are true stories about her life. So let's get reading. Stuart and Winston were my neighbors. They were my brothers by a solemn ceremony we had performed in their backyard one summer. They weren't the same religion as I was. They were Baptists. Their grandma, Eula May Walker, was my grandma now. My babushka had died 2 summers before. Sometimes my mother let me go to church on Sunday with them. How we loved to hear Miss Eula sing. She had a voice like slow thunder and sweet rain. We'd walk to church and back. She'd take my hand as we crossed College Avenue. Even though we'd been churching up like decent folks ought to, she'd say, I don't want you to step in front of one of those 2 fast cars. You'll be as flat as a hen's tongue. She squeezed my hand. When we passed Mr. Kadinsky hat shop, Miss Eula would always stop and look in the window at the wonderful hats. Then she'd sigh and we'd walk on. Now remember, you can also use pictures to help you, and I'm making an inference on what she's feeling as well. What do you think? I can tell by her eyes and the way her hands are up, by her face. Does it look like she likes those hats and wants one? It does to me. We called those Sundays Chicken Sundays because Miss Eula almost always fried chicken for dinner. There'd be collard greens with bacon, a big pot of Hoppin' John, corn on the cob, and fried spoon bread. One Sunday at the table, we watched her paper fan flutter back and forth, pulling moist chicken fried air along with it. She took a deep breath. Her skin glowed as she smiled. Then she told us something we already knew. That Easter bonnet in Mr. Kadinsky window is the most beautiful I ever did see, she said thoughtfully. The 3 of us exchanged looks and wondering what the kids are thinking. Here's the children we're talking about from our learning target. We wanted to get her that hat more than anything in the world. And what are you thinking? Are you thinking they're going to try and get her that hat? Stuart reached into the hole in the trunk of our wish tree in the backyard. He pulled out a rusty Band-Aid tin. The 3 of us held our breath as we counted the money inside that we had been saving for weeks. If we are going to get that hat for Miss Eula in time for Easter, we are going to need a lot more than this, I announced. Maybe we should ask Mr. Kadinsky if we could sweep up his shop or something to earn the rest of the money, Stuart said. I don't know, Winnie said fearfully. He's such a strange old man. He never smiles at anyone. He always looks so mean. We all agreed that it was worth a try anyway. Now to go back to our character traits, when the 3 of them were holding their breath when they were counting money, what does that tell you? I hope you're thinking that, oh, they were hoping, do we have enough money? And they couldn't wait to find out. So I'm still thinking about character traits for them, like what I'm thinking about what they're trying to do right now. And then they're going to go to someone's shop to see if they can earn money. The next day, we took a shortcut down the alley in the back of the hat shop. Bigger boys were there. They were yelling. Eggs flew past us and pelted Mr. Kudinski's back door. Just as the boys ran away, the door flew open. Mr. Kudinski glared straight at us. You there, he yelled. Why do you kids do things like this? It wasn't us, Stuart tried to say, but Mr. Kudinski wouldn't listen to us. All I want to do is live my life in peace. I'm calling your grandmother, he shouted as he wagged his finger in Stuart's face. Oh no, he thought it was them who threw the eggs and those guys got away. Miss Eula was waiting in her living room for us. Miss Eula, we didn't throw those eggs, I sobbed. Some big boys did, Stuart sputtered. What were you doing at the back of his shop in the first place, she asked. We knew that we couldn't tell her the truth, so we just stood there and cried. I'm thinking about why couldn't they tell her the truth? Because then they'd know, then she would know that they were trying to ask him for a job so they could earn money. So they sucked it up and made it look like they actually did it. She looked at us for a long while. Baby dears, I want to believe you. Heaven knows that I brought you children up to always tell the truth. If you say you didn't do it, then I believe you. It is too bad, though, she went on to say. That poor man has suffered so much in his life. He deserves more than eggs thrown at him. You know, he thinks you threw the eggs. You'll have to show him that you were good people. You'll have to change his mind somehow. In my kitchen the next day, we thought and thought, how can we win him over when he thinks that we threw those eggs, Stuart asks. He doesn't even like us, Winston chirped. Eggs, I said quietly. Eggs? Stuart asked. Eggs, I screamed. I went to the kitchen drawer and took out a lump of beeswax, a candle, a small funnel with a wooden handle, and some packets of yellow, red, and black dye. What is she thinking? Mom helped me show the boys how to decorate eggs the way my Bubba had taught us. The way they do it in the old country. We made designs on the eggshells with hot wax, then dyed them and finally melted the wax patterns off. We put the eggs in a basket and even though we were afraid, marched into Mr. Kudinski's shop and put them on the counter. This would be a great time for you to make a prediction in your head or to someone out loud. What do you think is going to happen next? And remember, it's okay if you're right or wrong. What are they going to do with those eggs? Do you predict they're going to throw it at him? I don't see evidence for that. Do you think he's going to they're all going to give it to him or? And how do you think he might react to that? He raised his eyebrows and glowered at us. Then his eyes dropped to the basket. Spasiba, he said softly. That means thank you in Russian. Pisanka eggs, he said as he looked closely. I haven't seen these since I left my homeland. We didn't throw those eggs at your door, Mr. Kudinski, we told him. He looked at us for a minute. Well then, you have great courage to be here. Chutzpah. You have chutzpah. Then his eyes glistened and his mouth curled into a warm smile. Come, have some tea with me. Was your prediction right? And now they've built that bridge to come together. We spent the whole afternoon talking together, having poppy seed cake and strong tea. He told us about his life. We told him about ours. When we finally got the courage to ask about doing odd jobs to earn some extra money, he apologized and told us there was no work. We didn't tell him what we wanted the money for. It didn't seem the right thing to do. Our hearts sank. I tell you this, he said thoughtfully. These eggs are as beautiful as my hats. Stuart, Winnie, and I looked at each other. It is almost Easter, he went on to say. I'm sure that people would love these eggs. Set up a table and sell them right there in my shop. This place would be a good spot either in your head or out loud to do a quick summary of what's happening in your own words. So what did he tell the children to do? And then do you think that'll work? So if I were you, I would be thinking, he said there's no other jobs for them to do, and so the kids were sad, but then he said, hey, maybe you could sell those eggs in my shop. And then think, will it work? Ooh, for the next few days, we worked very hard. We made almost a dozen pasanka eggs. When people came in, they picked them up and said things like beautiful, splendid, intricate, glorious. We sold them all in one single day. That says, for sale, real Ukrainian eggs. That afternoon, when all the eggs were gone, we counted our money. We had more than enough for the hat. Just as we were about to tell Mr. Kadinsky that we wanted to buy the hat, he came out from the back room holding a beautiful hat box, gift wrapped. Keep your money, children, he said softly. I have seen Miss Eula admire this. It is for her, isn't it? Tell her that I know you are very good children, such good children. Oh, so he let them sell it and keep the money, and then he's gifting them the hat for Miss Eula. And I'm wondering, do you think he knew that they wanted to do this? I think he might have had a clue. When Easter Sunday arrived, we thought our hearts would burst when we watched Miss Eula open the hat box. She held us close as big tears rolled down her cheeks. And I'm still thinking of a character trait for all the children, and we're just going to clump them together. When the author says things like our hearts would burst, like it's about to explode, is it a gift for themselves? No, it's a gift for somebody else, and they're just so excited to give it to her. I wonder if you have a connection and have ever felt that way when you're so excited to give somebody something. And that feeling of, feeling so grateful and happy, even though it's not for you. Our hearts sang along with the choir that Sunday. She looked so beautiful in that hat. When it was time for her solo, we knew that she was singing just for us. Her voice was like slow thunder and sweet rain. Later that day, as Miss Eula sat at the head of the table, she said, oh, baby dears, I can die happy now. After I'm dead on chicken Sundays, I want you to boil up some chicken, bones, gravy and all, and pour it over my grave. So late at night when I'm hungry, I can reach out and have me some. Then she rolled her head back and laughed from a deep, holy place inside. Winston, Stuart, and I are grown up now. Our old neighborhood has changed some, yet it's still familiar too. The freeway rumbles over the spot where Mr. Kadinsky's shop once stood. I think of him often and his glorious hats. We lost Miss Eula some time back, but every year we take some chicken soup up to Mountain View Cemetery and do just as she asked. Sometimes when we are especially quiet inside, we can hear singing, a voice that sounds like slow thunder and sweet rain. So I have something a little bit different for us on here. If you're taking a look at the screen here, and I'm just going to peek and make sure it's on my screen as well. I already have the evidence written for you to come up with a character trait for the children. Remember, that was our learning target at the beginning of the story. So here's my evidence. They wanted to earn money, right? And they checked their secret money box in their backyard before. Do you remember that? And then they realized they didn't have enough. So then another piece of evidence is that they wanted to do something for Mr. Kadinsky, especially after first they were scared of him, and then he thought that they threw eggs at him. So They were trying to build his trust again. And then another piece of evidence for the children is that they're so excited and happy when they're finally able to get the hat for Miss Eula. So those pieces of evidence, remember, it's based on their thoughts, actions, and words. Let's take a look at some choices here. So the children are, and then come up with a character trait. And I have a few examples at the bottom because of the evidence above. So I'm just doing a quick shortcut instead of writing it all out for you guys. I have the evidence up here, and then we'll complete that sentence. So let's see if any of those words fit. Do you think the children are selfish? And if you don't know what that word means, selfish means you want everything to yourself. It's like, no, it's mine. I want it. It's for me. Did we see any evidence of that in the text? And then does any of the evidence we have support that? I hope you disagree with that. No, they're not selfish. They're trying to do things for other people right now. I'm going to cross that off. How about rude? The children are rude because they're trying to earn money for their grandma, and then they're so excited when they get the hat. Does that fit? That doesn't really make sense either. Now, I'm also showing you some quick process of elimination, like testing tips to cross off choices if you're not sure. Now, I'm left with two answers, kind or thoughtful, and I'm thinking of what's the best fit. Which word do you think is the best based on my evidence up here? Because I agree, the children are very kind. They're very nice, but they're also thoughtful too. Which one do you think is the best answer? Kind or thoughtful? And there is a true answer. I would say, did you say thoughtful? Ding, ding, ding. I would write that the children are thoughtful because, first of all, they're looking at the money that they had already saved. They want to do something special for Mr. Kadinsky and prove themselves that they weren't the ones. And then they're so excited and want to do something special and keep it a secret for Miss Eula. Awesome job doing that. So after that, I also want to do a quick SWIBS that you guys can help me with. So let's take a look. Remember, SWIBS is somebody in, wanted, but so. As a quick recap of the story, very condensed, that means shorter version of the story. So let's take a look. The main character, I would say the children at home, and you could have said Mr. Kadinsky's shop, but I said at home, wanted, what did they want throughout the story? They wanted to buy Miss Eula a hat. But what was the main problem? I put that they didn't have enough money. So what did they do? Think about that for a second. Remember that the problem and solution have to go together. But they didn't have enough money. So what did they end up doing? They worked together, right? They worked together to sell eggs and were able to have enough money. Is that what you got as well? Awesome job. We just did that orally together, so I appreciate that. Have a great day, guys.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's time for another lesson episode of math, third grade math with Mrs. Nelson in the summer. We're going to talk about fractions again today. This is our third day talking about fractions. And so I want to quickly just chat about what we did last time. So last time we talked about unit fractions. Unit fractions fractions are fractions that represent one of the equal parts that a whole is split into. So we talked about fractions like 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, and so on. And you practice drawing models or pictures to show what those unit fractions could look like on a shape that we've split into however many equal parts, depending on what the denominator or the bottom number is. That was last time. Today, we're going to move into just looking at how to identify, name, and draw other fractions that aren't unit fractions, that aren't necessarily only naming one of the parts. They're fractions that might be showing more than one of the equal parts. So that's what we're getting into today, and I can't wait to get started. And we talked about unit fractions like these ones on my whiteboard, 1/2, 1/5, 1/3, and so on. And today we're going to look at fractions like this one on the screen. We're talking about more than one of the equal parts. So in this model, we have 2 out of the 3 parts shaded. So this fraction is 2/3. That's the kind of fraction we're working with and talking about today. And really quick reminder about some important words, the numerator and the denominator. We need to remember what the numerator and the denominator are because that's how we know how many parts we are partitioning or splitting our shape into or our whole into, and the numerator is telling us how many parts we're shading. So yesterday we were always just shading one of the parts on our models, but today we may be shading more than one part depending on what the numerator says to do. Before we get to today, I want to make sure that we really understand what we've learned so far about fractions. So this is a quick review for unit fractions. And the question on the screen says, do all of these models, so I want you to look at all 3 of these shapes, do all of these models show 1/4? So we're looking at the part that's shaded. Does each model here that you see show 1/4? And the question says why or why not. So think about that for a second. Do all of these models show 1/4? Based on what we've learned so far about fractions. Well, first of all, let's look at the red model, the square. Does that model show 1/4 shaded? Do we have a whole square split into 4 equal parts? I see 4 equal parts. Do we have one of them shaded? So that model, I think, does show 1/4. Let's look next door at the circle. Again, do we have 4 equal parts? We do. And one of them is shaded. Okay, so both of those models look like they show 1/4. What do you think about this bottom model, the green rectangle? If you're thinking that that model does not show 1/4, you are absolutely correct. And why not? That's right, because it doesn't have 4 equal parts. The part that's shaded is a lot bigger than the other 3 parts on the model. So this would be a non-example. This model does not actually show 1/4, but the other 2 models do. So that was just a quick review to check your background knowledge and memory so far on what we've learned about fractions. This is a quick review on what unit fractions look like, and I don't want to show that for too long, but a reminder that when we were looking at unit fractions yesterday, all of our fractions had a 1 in the numerator. Today, we're going to look at how to draw and shade models that represent fractions that are not unit fractions. So let's look at a fraction like 4/8. This fraction tells me that what I'm thinking about is that my whole is broken into 8 equal parts, and 4 of those parts are going to be shaded or colored in. So remember when we did unit fractions, how we started by drawing a shape? So that's how I'm going to start today. And I'm going to start with a rectangle. It's easy to draw and it's easy to split apart with lines. In this case, I'm thinking about 8 equal parts because that's my denominator. So I'm going to draw lines to make 8 parts. And one cool trick for making eighths or breaking it into 8 equal parts is to start by drawing a line right down the middle. Then split each of those parts down the middle again, and then draw lines to split each of those. And you should end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal parts. They're not perfect, but they're close. So then my last step is to figure out how many am I going to shade out of those 8 parts. Can you guess? That's absolutely correct. I'm going to shade 4 of those parts because I'm showing 4 eighths, 4 of those eighths. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I did some kind of sloppy shading, but you get the idea. So that's what you're going to practice doing today. I'm going to give you a fraction like 4 eighths, and you're going to draw and shade a model to show it. We're just working on drawing models to show fractions that are naming more than one of the equal parts. And there's another example on the screen for you to see, 3/4. So I just want to talk through how I could draw a model to show 3/4. Again, first we always start with what kind of shape do I want to use to represent the whole. And this time I want to use a circle, I think. So I'm going to draw a circle. And then the next thing I need to do is check out my denominator. And if you remember what the denominator tells me, it's reminding me how many parts I'm going to split that whole into. So remember, if we think about pizza, the denominator tells us how many slices the pizza is cut into. Now my last step, I got to look at the numerator, because if you remember what that tells me, it helps me with how many pieces I need to shade or color in. And in this case, since I'm showing 3/4, I'm going to shade in 3 of those pizza slices on my circle model. So you can see 1, 2, 3 out of the 4 equal parts are shaded. Before you get a chance to try drawing your own models of given fractions, I wanted to do some practice with looking at models that are already drawn and trying to name the fraction that the model is showing. So looking at the top circle here with the green part shaded, think about what fraction that one shows. And this is a unit fraction because it's only showing one part shaded. So it should be a review. If you said 1/3, that is correct. The next fraction over to the right of that one next door, we have thirds again, but this time there are 2 of them shaded. So that model is showing 2/3. Then down below, here's a model kind of showing the type of fraction that you'll be modeling today. This has more than one of the parts shaded. So in order to figure out what fraction we see on this circle with the orange parts shaded, we have to count all the parts. So starting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that tells me my denominator, my number on the bottom. And now all I have to do is count the parts that are colored in orange. And it looks like we have 6 parts that are shaded. So that model is showing us 6/12 is how we would read that fraction. And getting used to how to say the names of the fractions just takes some practice. So don't feel bad if you're still a little stuck on how to say it. But the bottom number, the denominator, gives you a clue to the name of the fraction. It's also connected to the number of parts in the fraction. So over here next door, we'll quickly try this one. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 parts all together. And it looks like 2 of those are shaded. So how would we say this fraction? If you said 2/4, way to go. So those are some examples of how we could name a fraction or write a fraction that's already drawn for us. And now we'll get to your practice for today. You get to try. So now it's your turn to give it a try, drawing and shading your own models to show fractions. And the three fractions I want you to draw and model are 2/4, 4/6, and 3/8. So get your tools for drawing and shading that you need, something to write with and something to write on. And take your time to make sure that you're carefully drawing lines to split those shapes that you choose to draw into equal parts to match the fraction that you're showing. Bonus is to look at this picture and try to decide what fraction, see if you can name and write the fraction that that model shows. All right, so now I'm going to give you a chance to check your models that you drew and see if you did a nice job at showing those three fractions that I gave you to think about. And then we'll talk about that bonus where we were looking at a model and seeing if you could name and write the fraction it was showing. So let's take a look and you can see how you did. These are the three fractions that I asked you to draw models to show. And I just gave two examples for each fraction because like with unit fractions, when we were practicing drawing those models, your models could look different ways. So depending on what kind of shape you chose to draw and how you decided to split your shape into equal parts and draw your lines, it might look different. So for 2/4, the big thing to check is, did you draw a shape and then split it into 4 equal parts in some way? Here's a circle example, and here's a square example, but you might have shown your 4 equal parts a different way or drawn another shape. And the other thing to check is, did you shade or color in 2 out of those 4 parts? For 4/6, same thing. Just check yourself on, did your model show a whole that was divided into 6 equal parts, and did you color in 4 of the parts? And it doesn't matter which 4 you shaded in. So looking over here at our example for 3/8, you could shade 3 parts right next to each other, or like on the top model here, they shaded 3 of the squares, kind of just how they wanted to do it. The main thing is that you're showing for 3/8, 8 equal parts altogether, and 3 of them are colored in. So check your models. Think about how you did. Again, the hardest part and the most important part is being able to show equal parts when we're drawing these models. So that just takes some practice. And the more carefully and slowly you draw your models, the easier it is. And I kind of cheated because I found some models that were already drawn. Since when I draw with the pen on the screen, it's really hard to get those perfect equal parts to show. Now let's take a look and see if you got to the bonus, which it's okay if you didn't, but we can think about it together. See if you were able to name the fraction that this model is showing us. So first, let's look at the whole circle and count it looks like a pizza, right? And count the slices or the little sections that it is divided into. And it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Be careful not to count any of the parts 2 times. So there's 8 parts altogether. And now all I have to do is count the green parts. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 of the parts are shaded out of 8 parts altogether. So this fractional model is showing us 6/8. So even if you weren't able to get to that one before we came back to the answers, hopefully now you're seeing what the answer should be and you're feeling good about it. And next, we're just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in our next lesson, and we'll do a review of what we learned today. All right. So what did we learn today? We learned how to look at a fraction that we're given, like 3/6, draw a model to show that fraction, by drawing a whole shape to represent the whole, one whole, dividing or partitioning that shape with lines to show it broken into equal sections or parts, and then shading the parts based on the numerator or the top number. So if we have 3, 6, we know we need to have a whole that's broken into 6 equal parts, and we need to shade 3 of those 6. And by the way, something that's kind of good to practice is saying fractions because they can be kind of tricky to name and read. So this fraction we would read as 3/6. And you kind of have to say that TH sound on the end. Sometimes when we're saying fraction names, it feels like we're spitting everywhere because we're saying fourths and fifths and sixths and sevenths. But it's good practice because it's kind of tricky on your tongue. And it is important to know how to read those fractions and say their names. So today that's what we learned. Next time, first for more practice, I almost forgot. Another game. So last time when we did unit fractions, I talked about how you could make like a matching card game for matching a unit fraction with its model that shows it, a picture. And we can do the same thing with the fractions that are not unit fractions, that are more than one part. So you can make some cards that just have fractions like 4/6, 2/4, and so on. And then you can draw models to show the different fractions, and you can make it a matching game where you're trying to match the fraction in number form to the model that it shows. Another great way to get a little bit more practice and just getting more familiar with your fractions, how to think about what they would look like in a model and how to learn how to say and read them, is just to draw or write a fraction. So 3/5. And then draw a model to show that fraction. And then practice saying it in word form. So 3/5. And you can even try writing that. And that's another great way just to get a little more familiar and a little more practice with fractions. Next time we meet in our next lesson, which I believe is going to be our last lesson of the summer, we will be going over how to solve word problems involving fractions and looking at some real life situations where we might have to use some math and fractions knowledge to solve it and figure it out. I'll see you then. Take care until then.
niños y niñas? Soy yo, la maestra Lorena Vázquez, y hoy es nuestro tercer día de aprendizaje esta semana. Continuamos aprendiendo sobre las fracciones y cómo funcionan, cómo representarlas en modelos y en objetos de la vida real, ¿verdad? Esta semana aprendimos sobre lo que es una fracción unitaria, lo que significa una fracción, una parte igual, y hoy vamos a continuar realmente identificando fracciones. Y nuestra meta de hoy no solo se enfoca en identificar fracciones, pero sigan conmigo para aprender exactamente qué es lo que tenemos que hacer el día de hoy. Bueno, comencemos con nuestra meta. Estoy aprendiendo a identificar fracciones. Esa parte ya la sabíamos. Pero nuestra meta específicamente dice que puedo utilizar el numerador para sombrear la cantidad correcta de una fracción. Ahora, sombrear ya les había comentado que quiere decir colorear, y numerador es nuestra palabra del día de hoy. Entonces, el numerador es la parte de la fracción que nos dice la cantidad de partes iguales que están sombreadas. Entonces, cuando yo diga numerador, ustedes van a decir numerador, cantidad de partes iguales, y luego vamos a practicar. Numerador, numerador, cantidad de partes sombreadas. Excelente, entonces atentos el día de hoy. Bueno, sabemos que una fracción es parte igual de un entero. Entonces, fracción unitaria, recuerdan que uni suena como uno, quiere decir una parte igual de un entero. Y numerador, numerador, cantidad de partes sombreadas. Muy bien, es la cantidad de partes iguales sombreadas. Eso quiere decir que coloreadas así. Denominador es la cantidad total de las partes iguales en el entero. Así que un repaso rapidito. Aquí tenemos partes del entero. El denominador ya se nos ha dado, es un 4. Así que yo voy a dividir este círculo en 4 partes iguales. Y la única manera de hacerlo es haciendo 2 líneas que intersectan de esta manera. El rectángulo también lo puedo hacer de manera similar. Puedo hacerlo así, una línea horizontal en el centro y una vertical en el centro. Ahora, si ustedes pueden contar conmigo, podemos ver claramente que hay 1, 2, 3, 4 partes. 1, 2, 3, 4 partes y todas son iguales. Ahora, ¿cuántas vamos a sombrear? El día de hoy vamos a ver el numerador, numerador, cantidad de partes sombreadas. Para ver cuáles son las cantidades sombreadas o las que tenemos que sombrear. En este caso, vamos a hacer 3 de las 4. 3. Así que en el rectángulo, aquí va 1, 2 y 3. Y niños y niñas, espero que estén practicando conmigo, dibujando estos cuadrados y círculos en sus pizarras, hojas de papel, para que ustedes puedan practicar, porque la práctica hace el maestro o la maestra. Y también aquí en el entero del círculo podemos hacer 1, 2 y 3. ¿No les parece fácil? Lo más difícil de las fracciones realmente al comienzo es dibujar las partes iguales. Toma mucha práctica, así que por eso yo les había sugerido que usen una hoja de papel para que puedan ver exactamente la proporción. Si yo tengo un papelito y lo doblo a la mitad y lo doblo a la mitad otra vez, fácilmente puedo hacer 4 partes iguales. Y puedo practicar sombreándolas en el papel. Así que la práctica es lo que los va a hacer mejor y mejor cada vez. Vamos a hacer justamente eso. Pero antes de practicar, un repaso del nombre de las fracciones unitarias. Aquí, una parte de 1 es un entero, todo completo. 1 de 2 es una mitad y se ve así. 1 de 3 es un tercio y se puede ver así. 1 de 4 es 1/4 y se ve así. 1 de 6 es 1/6 y se ve así. Y la fracción unitaria 1 de 8 es 1/8 y se puede ver así. Este es solo un modelo, es un círculo. Podemos hacer rectángulos, tiene diferentes formas y conforme vayan aprendiendo más, van a ir viendo los diferentes modelos. Ahora sí, a practicar. Muy bien. Aquí el repaso del día de ayer, si estuvieron conmigo, recuerda que vimos este delicioso pastel o pie y vimos que el numerador, cantidad de partes sombreadas. Excelente. Era de 1. Alguien se había comido 1/4 parte de este pastel y era lo que faltaba en este caso. Y había 4 partes iguales, entonces de ahí salió 1/4. 1/4 de este pastel está desaparecido. En las barras de chocolate eran 8 partes iguales, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 y 8, y una de esas partes estaban desaparecidas. Alguien se comió ese cuadrito de chocolate. Así que la fracción de la parte desaparecida de esta parte de aquí es 1/8. Muy bien. A ver, vemos otro ejemplo. Tenemos una deliciosa naranja. Ahora, bueno, rebanada de naranja. ¿A ustedes les gusta? A mí me fascina, especialmente ahora que es verano. Vamos a ver, ¿qué pasa si alguien viene y se come esta rebanada de aquí y esta rebanada de aquí y esta de aquí y esta de aquí? Tenía muchas ganas de comer naranja. ¿Cuál es la parte sombreada de esta naranja? ¿Cuál es el numerador? Cantidad de partes sombreadas. Si tú dijiste que el numerador era 1, 2, 3 y 4, porque 4 partes de la naranja son las que están sombreadas, tienes toda la razón. 4 de 6. Y esta fracción se lee 4/6. Muy bien. Otro ejemplo más. Aquí tenemos una deliciosa pizza de vegetales. A ver, podemos ver en los espacios en negro aquí, podemos asumir que estas son las partes que están faltando, las que están sombreadas aquí. Una, ¿cuántas son? Son 2. Y vamos a confirmar el denominador. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 y 8. Esta pizza tiene 8 rebanadas iguales, entonces son octavos y de ahí 2 rebanadas, 2 están faltando. 2/8 es la cantidad de pizza que está sombreada y es la cantidad de pizza que falta. Niños y niñas, ¿no ven que es muy fácil identificar el numerador? Cantidad de partes sombreadas. Muy bien. ¿De una fracción? Yo sí. Vamos a ver unos ejemplos más. Ok. Ahora tenemos rectángulos y tenemos la fracción aquí a mano izquierda, precisamente aquí. Y nuestro trabajo es sombrear la cantidad que indica la fracción. Ahora, el denominador ya está hecho en todas, ¿verdad? El dibujo ya está hecho para ahorrarnos un tiempo, pero ustedes en casa, en su pizarra, deben de practicar hacer estos dibujos y estos rectángulos con partes iguales. Si no, el modelo de la fracción estaría incorrecto. Así que tómense su tiempo, dibujen el rectángulo y también después dibujen las partes iguales. Y les voy a mostrar con este primero para que vean cómo podría hacerlo yo. Entonces, yo empezaría de esta manera. Haría el rectángulo. Y vieron que no me sale muy derechito, pero estoy haciendo mi mejor esfuerzo en la computadora. Y 3 partes. Si tu rectángulo se ve algo similar a esto, es suficiente. No, recuerden, no somos máquinas y no nos va a salir perfecto. Ahora, el numerador, muy bien, dice 2 tercios. Díganlo conmigo. 2 tercios. Así que vamos a sombrear 2 de los 3. Aquí está. 2 de las 3 partes. Me gusta el negro, voy a ponerlo en rojo. 1, 2. Niños y niñas, ustedes pueden sombrearla de esta manera o pueden hacerlo de esta manera, consecutivos, uno detrás del otro. 1, 2. Ahora, si estuviera yo dibujando en una hoja de papel, tomaría un poquito más de cuidado de rellenar bien el cuadro, pero no dejen que su línea que divide las partes iguales se tape. Porque si hago yo esto, es más difícil. Si yo tomo mi lápiz y le hago así, es más difícil poder ver dónde está la parte igual. Así que tengan cuidado de eso. Vamos a ver la siguiente. La siguiente dice 3 de 4, la fracción se lee 3 cuartos. Así que ya tenemos aquí el modelo con 1, 2, 3 y 4. Y ahora solo nos toca sombrear 3 de ellos. A ver, esta lo voy a hacer vertical. 1 y 2 y 3. Muy bien. Así que niños y niñas, ¿qué les parece? No es muy difícil, ¿verdad? A ver, esta vez no tengo la fracción, pero tengo la palabra, tengo el nombre de la fracción. Aquí dice 2 mitades. El modelo es una pista porque pueden ver que aquí hay 2 partes iguales. Entonces, si son 2 mitades, esta mitad y esta mitad, el denominador es de 2 porque hay 2 partes. Y el numerador, cantidad de partes sombreadas. Excelente, partes iguales que están sombreadas. Es también de 2, porque aquí nos dice que son 2 mitades. 2 mitades. Una mitad, la del lado izquierdo, y 2 mitades, la del lado derecho. Entonces, niños y niñas, ¿qué notan? 2 mitades es lo mismo que todo el rectángulo entero. Mira, si no estuviera dividido en partes. Todo el rectángulo entero. 2 mitades. Siguiente ejemplo. Muy bien. El denominador es de 8. Vamos a contar las partes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. ¿Se ven iguales? Sí, son relativamente igual. Quizás haya una diferencia mínima, pero sí se ven iguales. Y el 6 nos dice cuántas son las partes sombreadas, ¿verdad? Entonces, el 6 es el... Sí, si lo dijeron, es el numerador. Numerador. Cantidad de partes sombreadas. Muy bien. A ver, entonces vamos a sombrear 6 partes iguales. Una, voy a hacer un diseño. 2, 3, 4, 5 y 6. 6 octavos. 6 octavos. Hay 6 partes iguales. Bueno, niños, hoy de tarea les encargo que completen este modelo. El número que está arriba de partes sombreadas es 3 y las partes del entero son 6. Muy bien, ¿cree que pueden hacerlo? Inténtalo y el día de mañana vamos a comprobar la respuesta. ¿Está bien? Muy bien. Niños y niñas, hemos llegado al final de nuestra lección. Entonces, hoy practicamos sombrear la cantidad, aquí está, la cantidad correcta de una fracción y para poder hacerlo nos fijamos muy cercamente al numerador. Numerador. Cantidad de partes sombreadas. Excelente. Las partes sombreadas, que es el número de arriba de la fracción. El número de arriba, ¿ok? Y el denominador es el de abajo, el que nos dice el total. Así que quiero que practiquen, tomen sus hojas de papel, su pizarra, practiquen haciendo modelos y dividiéndolas en partes iguales y sombreando diferentes partes. Y a ver cómo pueden ustedes enseñarles a sus seres queridos lo que es una fracción, lo que es el número de arriba, qué significa, y el de abajo. Y mañana, en nuestro último día de aprendizaje de matemáticas de tercer grado, vamos a explorar problemas de fracciones. Recuerden, el último día de la semana siempre estamos viendo problemas de la vida real que podemos resolver o representar con matemáticas. Muchas gracias por acompañarme y hasta la próxima. Cuídense.